In this session, I want to talk about note choice. That is, what notes would a bass player play if you're playing in a session with a few people, like a fiddler, a guitar player, possibly a mandolin player or a banjo player. And you're playing a fiddle tune in old-time music, and what would you actually be playing? Let's talk about the key of D, which we've talked about in a couple of other sessions, because that allows us to have the choice of playing on open strings or actually fretting notes. And this might seem to be a kind of strange topic, because typically I've never gotten input from other people as to what I should be playing, unless for some reason I'm playing a minor chord and I'm with people that think that old-time music is only made up of major chords. But it's more than just chord choice, but it's notes and what intervals you might be playing when you're playing an old-time tune. And what note do you start with? And are you just playing unison notes, meaning you're staying on the same note, versus you're going to be rocking horse-like between the root and the fifth? So I like to think about note choice both in reinforcing the harmonic structure of the tune and also adding color to the actual feel, and based on what I hear other people playing, I would play, potentially would almost by second nature be playing either open strings, or I might be playing up the neck, because I like the way that the notes sound, sort of irrespective of what note am I playing. Playing in different places on the neck are going to give you a different tonal quality. So those are things to think about. How fast or slow the tune is will also influence you in terms of what your note choices are. So let's look at, we're in the key of D, and so as I talked about a little bit in another session, the most important chords in the D major scale are your number one, your one chord, or your root, which is a D major chord, and the three notes in that chord are D, F sharp, and A. The next strongest chord in the key of D is A major, the 5 chord, and it's also referred to as the dominant in music theory. So the notes in the A major chord are A, C sharp, and E. And these chords always imply that you could move to the octave, which would be, if I'm starting on the open D string, here's my D an octave higher. Same with A. Here's my low A on the open string on the A string, which is the 3rd string. Or I could play an octave higher, which is also A, but it's played on the G string right here. Okay, so you have the D chord, or the 1 chord, which is the first note of the scale. You have the 5 chord, which is the A major chord, which is the 5th note of the scale. And then you have the subdominant, or the next strongest chord in a D major scale, or the the key of D, which is your G chord. You can play an open G, your G string, your 1st string, or you can play low G, which is fretted here, on your E string. So, if I'm playing a D chord, probably the most standard bass line I could play would be, let's see, if we're playing in 4/4 time, 1, 2, 3, 4, that would be our meter or our time. I could play just D, or I could add the fifth, which is the A, which is in the D major triad, is the top, either the top note or the bottom note, depending on the way those notes are situated. It's called, depending on whether they're inverted or not. So the bass line, though, could easily be played on open strings, where instead of playing 4 Ds, I'm actually going between a D down to the A string. Or I could play that D and go to the upper A, so, or I could play a D on the A string and play an octave or the A above that on the D string. So here's an A on the D string where I'm playing essentially a closed chord. I'm actually fretting those notes. Which is the same as with one open string. So that already gives us several choices. I could be playing just 1, 2, 3, 4. I could play 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Or I could go to the octave D and play So let's look at that shape that I just played. Basically, I have a D that I'm fretting right here on the A string using my first finger or my index finger. And then I'm playing the A, or a fifth above. And notice how I'm putting 2 fingers down. We never use the third finger by itself on upright bass. On electric you do, but not on upright. So, but this finger can be used, this third finger, to support your pinky or your fourth finger to hold that string down, give you a nice tone. Okay, so that's what I'm doing here. I could put more fingers down as well. I don't often do that. So, okay, so I'm on the A string with a D, A, so see that there's kind of a shape here where I have the octave, the D to 8 notes above, which is called the octave, which is that higher D the next time the D appears. And that shape is the same relationship, because these strings are a fourth apart, all up and down the neck. So if I were to be playing a B flat, here's an A, the next note up is a B flat. Well, the octave is in exactly the same location shape-wise. Sorry about that. Here's our D. Okay, so your B flat. So you've got that relationship is the same. And even if you have an open A, your octave is here. So this shape I'm just trying to find a note that is more recognizable to you guys. So here's a C, and here's an octave C, G, a G on the D string. So this relationship of being two strings apart in this orientation, whether I'm on the A string and I'm playing that shape, or I'm on the E string and playing that shape, because these strings are a fourth apart, the octave is going to be positionally in exactly the same place. And that's very useful because even if you don't know what key you're in, although you should learn where the notes are in relation to the neck, as long as you find that root note, you know that your octave is going to be here. And your A, low A, which corresponds with your open A, the octave will be right there. So what else is useful about that shape? Well, as I mentioned before, you have your fifth note of the scale, which is the dominant, and you've got your fourth note of the scale, which is your subdominant. So the 1, 4, and 5 in a major key are more often than not in old-time music the chords you're going to be hitting. And very, very conveniently, your fourth is right here, and your fifth is one string up right here. So you have this shape, and I'm going to just move a little bit closer so I'm sure that you can see this. This shape where I have my root, here's an A, I go up one string to a D, which would represent the root of the 4 chord, and I move over by one step and play an E, which is the 5th in the key of A. So I have A, D, E, A. If I'm in D, here's my D note. Same relationship, D, the 4th, G, A, so that shape, which is like a box where you have your 1, 4, 5 octave, you can move that shape all up and down the neck. And because the strings are a fourth apart, you've got your major root notes that you would be oftentimes playing in any key right at your fingertips. So those are very important to learn and to know where they're located. And because the string bass is fretless, you saw I was kind of moving around earlier, sometimes, I mean, the more you're playing, the more you actually know on your instrument where those notes fall. You can also check by playing an octave. that helps you to get more familiar with moving around the neck. But you've got the note choice by playing an open, D, A, D, A, E, A, E, and here's your fourth chord, G, D, G, D, D, A, D, A, E, your five chord. So the last thing I'll show you is where's the third, because those are basically, you're taking a chord which is built on thirds. So in a D chord you have a D, F sharp, and an A. So where's that third? Well, if this is, here's my fretted D, the third is right on the one string above that, or in this case the D string. So the D note on the A string, the F sharp on the D string, and the A note, or the fifth note of the scale, also on the D string. So you have this shape. And that's also transferable. That same shape, the same harmonic intervals are represented up and down the neck in the same manner because the strings are 4 steps apart, or a fourth apart. So here's C, and a third above is is E to G. Hot day today in Kentucky. So that's your C triad. Your G. So that gives you a little bit of feel for note choices. Because I don't have a band here and I'm not singing today to discuss this with y'all, it's a little bit difficult for me to take it beyond that, but I think in summary, you have the choice of playing open strings, fretted strings. You have relationships that are transferable up and down the neck when you are fretting or pressing down on the strings to hit these notes. So if you know what the shapes are, in other words, you've got your root or your fundamental chord note, like a C or a D, or what, depending on what key you're in, with the octave 2 strings away in this kind of diagonal orientation, and then your fifth would be right below the octave, and then your fourth is right above the root note. The things you would be thinking about or just intuitively doing in terms of string choice would be influenced by who you're playing with, what the tempo of the tune is. As the tune goes on, and say the fiddler is playing in a lower octave versus up high, that might cause you to choose a different place on the neck to play the bass line, because that is going to blend much nicer. So your aesthetic, and as you work on the bass and get more mastery of the instrument, those things will influence why you might choose to play sometimes with open strings and sometimes you might play further up the neck. Hope this has been interesting for you and will spur some thought and experimentation. Thanks a lot for listening.